Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mariah and I talk about books and bookish things on my channel. If you're returning, thank you so much for stopping by. I really love seeing all of you. We are getting so close to my 80 subscriber goal for 2020. I just need 6 more subscribers, so if you're not subscribed yet, please consider liking and subscribing and hitting that bell for more notifications. And today we are going over my November wrap-up. I have my books here. In the month of November, I read 13 out of the 14 books I had planned. I read 4 fantasies, 1 middle grade fantasy. I read 1 historical fiction, middle grade. I read 3 sci-fis, ranging from adult to young adult. I read 2 horror, 2 thrillers. Overall, a very good month. I'm going to go over these in the order they are presented in my TBR name video, which I will leave linked in the cards if you want to go check that out for the month of November. I broke 100 books in November and I'm very happy about that. So let's get started with the first book. The first book I read in November was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is the standalone prequel to the Lord of the Rings, his Lord of the Rings series. I love these books. This was a reread for me. This was for the prompt my sister Heather picks. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars, not for reading critically. Emotionally, it will always be a 5 out of 5 stars in my heart. This tells the story of a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins who is recruited to go on this mission to help 13 dwarves gain their treasure back from the dragon Smaug. I adore this book. I really love the universe. I really love the character development, and it's a great book. It was a reread. I'm a huge Tolkien nerd, so. This was book number 1 and book 100. Next I read Shadows of the Dark Crystal by J.M. Lee. This is a YA book, the first in a series, set in the world of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance TV show, which in and of itself is a prequel to the Dark Crystal movie, which I am obsessed with and have been since I was a child. The cover is illustrated by Brian Froud, who did the original character designs and helped Jim Henson with the puppets for the original Dark Crystal movie. And the interior was illustrated by Corey Godby. I really liked this series. This series tells the story of a young Gelfling woman named Naya goes on this quest to prove that her brother isn't a traitor to the Skeksis lords at the Crystal Palace. And along the way, she comes into contact with the other tribes of the Gelfling, which was really fun to look into. Realizes that things aren't exactly what the Skeksis lord want the Gelflings to believe, and it was a story that was about friendship and family and duty. I really enjoyed the look at the different cultures of the Gelfling and how each Gelfling tribe and their Madra all were very distinct cultures, were all fleshed out in their own ways and had their own beliefs and biases in the way that they did things. And this was illustrated not only in the description of how each of the Gelflings looked, but also the description of how they interacted with each other. And they each have their own form of magic. The Naya is from the Drinchen, which are in the swamps far to the south of the Crystal Palace, and this was fascinating to see how her family, they were very family oriented. The whole tribe got together in one place every night to eat and to sing and just to have fun and how they were more aquatic based, whereas the Stonewoods, which is another tribe, were very kind of like hobbits. And I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the exploration of the different cultures, and that really rounded out the universe of the Dark Crystal. I'm really looking forward to continuing this series. I gave this book maybe 3.5 to 4 stars. I'll put all the ratings down here. But yes, I highly recommend this book if you enjoyed the Dark Crystal and you really want to dive more into that universe. This is a great diving off point. Next was my pick, and I chose The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi. This tells the story of 13-year-old Charlotte Doyle, who is on her way home from boarding school in England to her family in Rhode Island. It was the pick of a friend of mine, and I found myself annotating here and there as well within the book. And I found this book to be rather simply written. It's supposed to be for children. Avi is in that weird children to middle grade bridge. And it talked about racism and classism and sexism in the time that this was set in, which was 1832. It talked about acknowledging when you've done something wrong and holding yourself accountable for that. While I didn't really enjoy the book by itself, I really appreciated what it did for its audience, its target audience, and I understood why this could be a really influential book for another generation of readers. I'm really going to recommend that my sister Fiona, which I know is watching this, she picked this up. It's rough to read at times, but it's definitely worth the read. Like I said, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, not for lack of content. I didn't connect with Charlotte as much as I wanted to, and at the beginning I found her character completely intolerable. I will say that I really do think that if you are a fan of middle grade, this is a relatively short read. It's more of the younger middle grade, but it's definitely worth the read. Next I read Alpha Land by Cristina Jurado, I think. This was a sci-fi collection of stories. It's all set in Spain. She's a Spanish author. I found these stories remarkably weird, but also very interesting in their approach to the topic. I don't really know how to describe these. They're all very graphic, I should warn you. Not so much in the description of things, or like language or gore. It's more graphic it has graphic sexual content in some of the stories. It's a very interesting and fascinating look into a language, and the words that are used are very high level words in those languages, which as a language learner I can appreciate, but it's also terrifying to think that we are about reading this book in Spanish. I'm sure it'd be a really weird experience. I gave this book 3.25 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but it was very weird and speculative in some aspects. Not speculative as in like, oh, this could happen, but the way it was written was very unique. It seemed more flow of thought at some point. Not a bad book by any means, it was just weird. And I find myself either loving weird books or just finding them kind of like, okay, that was a book that I read. Next I read The Crime at Black Dudley by Marjorie Ellingham. This is the first book in the Albert Campion series, or this is part of the Felony Mayhem's Vintage series, and it was originally published in 1929. This is a mystery that's set at a house where a bunch of guests are gathered together to visit their friend, and one of them, the owner of the home dies, or the renter of the home dies, I guess would be more accurate. The renter of the home dies, and his death isn't quite what you think it is. And while this does not feature Albert Campion as the main character, it does introduce the character and he is the main character for the rest of the series. I found the main character kind of dull, but my ring light died. But I really enjoyed this book. I really thought that it was a fun, cozy mystery. And if you like cozy mysteries and you like Agatha Christie, I would suggest picking this up because it's great. Next, I was supposed to read the lowest rated on my Goodreads / Storygraph, and that was originally A Matter of Principle. I started reading it thinking that I would just rage annotate it, but what ended up happening was 15 pages into it, I thought that the idea behind the premise behind the essays and the collection of essays that it was ridiculous and was absolutely contrary to all of the evidence, and was an apologist way of saying, well, yeah, it was bad, but. So, I'm never going to mention that book again on my channel. I'm never going to read it. I can go on a whole rant on how it's based on the idea that the US is somehow a liberal democracy, which by definition we aren't. But I'm not going to control my rage. Instead, talk about the next book, which is Patricia Cornwell's Quantum. Quantum is a sci-fi book, or set in 2020, after the Space Force has been formed, and the main character is Captain Chase. Captain Chase, the plot is really weird, but there's this mystery that might involve her sister and a top secret mission with a space launch, and I enjoyed the space aspects. I enjoyed the idea of a female character who is in the STEM field, was in a STEM field both professionally and in the military. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. However, I still don't know what the plot was about, other than it had something to do with their twin sister. And we didn't get any real wrap up onto what was happening. I realized this is the first book in a series, but I need one mystery to be concluded before we go on to the next book. I don't want a mystery series that is focused on the same mystery throughout a number of books. That's, unless you really pull it off well, which I wasn't all that enthused by this book. I found it kind of plotting at times. I felt that it could have moved much faster. I felt descriptions of how smart this character was kind of blasé almost. I felt like it focused too much on setting the world up and not enough on the characters themselves. So we didn't understand why the characters were doing what they were doing unless it was from our main character's perspective. I am not saying that this was a bad book, it just wasn't for me. And I don't think that I'll be continuing on with the series. The next book I was supposed to read was The Face Faker's Game. This was for the prompt read a book with Flora or Fauna in the author's name, and Face Faker's Game is by Chandler J. Birch. However, I didn't end up reading this. I read instead Lady Castle. Lady Castle is a comic about a town and a castle that all the men in the town went off on this quest with the king, and they were all killed except for one. So the one surviving man comes back to the town and says, "Hey, everybody died, make me king." And instead, one of the local blacksmith's wife, and now only blacksmith, gets chosen to be king. I don't really want to go too much farther into it because this has some great things. I really enjoyed cheeky fantasy that takes... I read Rat Queens earlier this year and really enjoyed that, which gave me very similar vibes. This had songs and references to songs from our world that were made to fit into the story of made to fit the story of what was going on in Lady Castle, and it was really interesting to see all the mystical creatures that this curse brought to the castle, and how the ladies of Lady Castle learned to deal with out there women. The women in the book were very diverse. I really enjoyed how human they all were. I really enjoyed the various things they brought to their new king to give her the ability to rule effectively and make the right decisions for them. I also really enjoyed the sister dynamic in this, where one sister idolized their father and the other was kind of the victim of their father. And I just really enjoyed this comic. I'm absolutely going to continue this series in 2021. Specifically, I really want to fit that and more of Rat Queens in there. So if you love Rat Queens, if you liked Nimona, I would really suggest picking up Lady Castle. It was a lot of fun. The next book I DNF'd, and that was Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. I know that Kaylani at Kaylani Simple Me loves this series, but this series just wasn't for me. There was weird, I felt the main character's response to certain things. Trigger warnings: attempted rape, some gore, explicit sex. Okay, now that we've moved on for that. I really felt that the main character was almost victim blaming herself by saying she had to make a police report because otherwise they were going to do it again, and she's kind of guilting herself into making a police report when she really just wants to stay home and sort of recover. And then additionally, after going through through everything, the very next night she lets a stranger into her house and they have sex. This just wasn't for me. There are the way that certain things were described was really weird and uncomfortable for me, and I couldn't get over the fact that the main love interest's name was Wrath. His name was Wrath. And yeah, this wasn't for me. It was a little too tropey for me, I think, and that was my biggest thing. Additionally, I didn't like the main character. I didn't like the fact that the author made her victim blame herself. It's really weirded me out. It really weirded me out. So I DNF'd this book. I'm probably not going to pick it up again, which is fine. It's fine. If you are interested in this book, please don't feel like I'm judging you at all. I love Kaylani, and at Kaylani Simple Muse videos, I love how passionate she is about the series. It's just not for me. Next I read Binti Home, Nnedi Okorafor. This is the second book in the Binti series, and I loved it even more than the first, if that's possible. It was a slightly longer audiobook, but as usual, some things didn't make sense, and some things obviously in the beginning, but they made sense as you read. But it was little things, and it wasn't enough to take away from my overall enjoyment of this book. The Binti series tells the story of Binti, who is a girl from Earth who is accepted into this prestigious intergalactic university, who is the first of her people to leave. And on the way to this university, her ship is attacked and everybody's killed but her. And I can't really tell you more, it's the second book, but this one hit me in the feels so hard. So hard. It deals with trigger warnings for PTSD and racism. Overall, I'm adoring the series. Ms. Okorafor is literally one of my new favorite authors, and anything she writes I'm going to pick up, because I read Akata Witch, Binti, and now Binti Home this year and have loved every single one of them. Like, without a question, adored it. So, well played, 2020. Well played. I also read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia this in the month of November, and I loved it. I loved it. It is 100% exactly what was advertised. It is a Jane Eyre Gothic novel, or a Gothic novel in the vein of Jane Eyre, with Lovecraftian influences, and I loved the... Naomi isn't necessarily a likable character, however, what she's willing to do for her family and her devotion to family is chef's kiss amazing. I really enjoyed the build-up. Once I started reading this book and actually reading this book, I had problems putting it down. I was supposed to be playing board games with friends of mine, and I was just like, okay, but it's not my turn, so it's my turn. Okay, just let me finish this page real fast. The ideas in this book are amazing. I thought it was very original. I really enjoyed the setting and how rich it was. I appreciated this talk about folklore versus science. I really enjoyed how they touched upon eugenics. I really enjoyed the fact that it's just... Please pick this book up. Please pick this book up, because I'm not kidding. This is one of my new books. One of my new favorite books. It was spooky and autumnal and just... I should probably tell you what it's about, huh? So, the Mexican Gothic tells the story of Naomi, whose family gets a letter from her cousin who was recently married to an English family and taken away to live in the countryside, and it seems like her cousin is going insane. So she Naomi is sent to go find out what's going on with her cousin and possibly bring her cousin back to Mexico City. This is set in Mexico in the 1950s. And when she gets there, the family acts like her cousin just is sick. Not deathly sick, just sick, and that she just needs to rest, and puts remarkable restrictions on Naomi and how much access she has to her cousin. This is a fascinating book, and it has left me both terrified and even more intrigued by mushrooms, if that was at all humanly possible. I have a small obsession with mushrooms, just like a small one. I appreciated the depth of the story. I appreciated the history that went into it. I appreciated how it transitioned. Please pick up this book. It was so good. I feel remarkably lucky that I was introduced to this book, or I bought this book right after it came out, because this is absolutely one of the best buys for 2020. Hands down. This and The Only Good Indians came out at about the same time. I think they came out on the same day, or like a few days apart, and I loved both of them. I've also read more of Silvia Moreno Garcia's books and loved them. So Stephen Graham Jones, Nnedi Okorafor, and Silvia Moreno Garcia are now 3 of my favorite authors. And I don't say that lightly, ever. Next I read The 7 Spiritual Laws by Deepak Chopra. This was a very short self-help book. It was published in 1994. I thought this was a very interesting, more spiritual look at how to be more successful. I didn't connect to it as much, but I thought it was a really good read, and I thought it had some very, very good points. The idea is that there are 7 spiritual laws that you can apply to your life. 7 spiritual laws that you can apply to your life that will make your life both easier and you less likely to be emotionally affected by what's going on around you. I've been reading a lot of books that talk about the same basic idea. I did enjoy this, and I would recommend it if you like self-help books. It's a really short, quick read. I also read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I gave this book 3 stars. It is a thriller about a woman who killed her husband and has been silent ever since, and the psychotherapist who wants to treat her. I thought that the concept was intriguing. I had seen it a lot on BookTube with mixed reviews. I have to say that it wasn't a bad book. It just wasn't for me, and I thought that it has an unreliable narrator. It's very interesting to see the woman's point of view, even though she says almost nothing throughout the book, through her diary entries, and the twist at the end I thought was a little much. However, I did really enjoy how quick it was to read. I thought that like I said, the twist was kind of overdone, and I thought that it could have been a little bit better. And by saying that, I still gave this 3 stars. I still enjoyed the read. It was not a waste of time for me, and I was still really intrigued to see how it ended. The ending wasn't for me, and the amount of the writing style also was a little weird for me. And I like I said, I didn't really like the main character at all. So I should say it's told from the point of view of the psychotherapist and the female patient. But the psychotherapist, I thought he was kind of an asshole, honestly. And he was always portraying other people as assholes, which, you know, it just wasn't for me. If you have other thriller recommendations, please leave them down below, because I find that they're really quick and fun reads. I also read The Shining by Stephen King. I think I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is famous from the Stanley Kubrick movie, which I love, and the Stephen King book, which I thought it was pretty good. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This tells a story of a family who goes to the Overlook Hotel outside of Denver, Colorado to take care of it during the winter, and slowly and painfully the family is kind of affected by the ghosts of the hotel. This is both a haunted house and kind of a psychological thriller. Trigger warnings for gore, a strong language, use of racial slurs, and I guess child abuse. It was way longer than I thought it was going to be. It is over 400 pages, and I thought it was going to be a much shorter book, similar to Carrie, and it was not. I found the character of Wendy very timid and kind of boring. She's kind of just holding herself together, but she doesn't really ever act on her own volition. I really liked the character of Danny and how he's just trying to understand all of these adult concepts coming into his head through the lens of a child, and how he kind of explains that in himself. I didn't like the character of Jack at all. I did appreciate the ending. I think I liked the ending in the book more than I liked the end of the Stanley Kubrick movie, which is rare for a Stephen King book, as we all know. But I honestly think that a really good Stephen King book, Stephen King can be kind of hard to get into because he does spend so much time on world building, but you really do get a sense of the family dynamics, you get a sense of each of the characters intimately, and you kind of understand where they're coming from and how they feel about things. I would recommend this to people who are willing to acknowledge that some parts of this are very problematic and like horror, but there are some parts of this that are very problematic, and you should absolutely go into the book acknowledging that, and acknowledging that what is said in the book, particularly towards the end, to the character of Dick Halloran is unacceptable. And that's part of the reason that this got a 3.5 instead of a full 3.75 or even 4 stars. Problematic books, you should read whatever you want to read, but go into it acknowledging the fact that it's problematic. I also read The Gauntlet by, I want to get this name right, so Karuna Riazi. This is a middle grade fantasy book I think would be akin to Ready Player One meets Jumanji meets The Labyrinth. I wish this book had been out when I was the age, because I would have been obsessed with it, and even as an adult, I'm borderline obsessed with it. This book, a trio of friends from New York City find themselves trapped inside a mechanical board game and are forced to play the game as they are going through and beat the architect as they are also simultaneously trying to find the main character's little brother who got sucked into the game with them. I really appreciated this for the discussion of ADHD and how, as an older sibling of a sister with special needs, I always felt that it was my job to help take care of her, to make sure that she was happy, to make sure she was healthy, and even when we fought, I ended up feeling really bad afterwards. So I really connected with the main character on that point. I also really enjoyed the world that was built in this board game. I thought it was fascinating. I loved the characters. I loved the challenges that were put before them. I found myself, there was never a time in the book where I wasn't rooting for the main characters and hoping that they would 100% succeed and go on, and not in the general sense, but I really wanted them to succeed. The ending was fantastic. I thought the Middle Eastern and the Middle Eastern flair was really amazing. I thought that the fact that the main character wore a hijab was really, really nice. I thought that it discussed topics such as not belonging when you move from a more diverse area to a more whitewashed area, I guess. or a gentrified area, and how that can affect your happiness and things like birthday parties and such. I really enjoyed that, and I really found that I want to read more books like this and more diverse middle grade like this, because it was so good. At times it was terrifying, but it was so good. Like, please pick this up. If you like middle grade, I highly suggest The Gauntlet by Karuna Riazi. Final book on my list was the punishment book for not finishing all of my TBR books from last month, and that book was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. The Road by Cormac McCarthy is a post-apocalyptic story about a man and his son. I didn't hate this book. I also didn't enjoy it. And I think part of that is just Cormac McCarthy's writing. He's more postmodern than I normally read. However, I found that he describes things very well. He kind of gives the bleakness of the landscape, but he doesn't write very flowery. I also felt that I had seen the movie before I read the book. The movie and the book are actually pretty closely aligned. It just takes out of some of the more graphic parts of. There are trigger warnings, before I forget. Trigger warnings for cannibalism, for child endangerment, for food scarcity, for suicidal ideations. It is a dark book, don't get me wrong. It was also a little weird for me in the fact that none of the characters had names. You didn't know what the main character's name is. We don't have a name for his son. His son was just the boy. And some of the decisions that the main character makes in the book didn't make sense to me. And I think that if he had made a different decision, the ending would not have been what it was. The ending is very sad. And I feel like you should 100% look into trigger warnings. If you like more bleak apocalyptic thriller or post-apocalyptic thrillers or post-apocalyptic narratives, I guess. This wasn't really a thriller. It was more of a story. It was very character-driven, not very plot-driven. And I think that if you like those things, you should pick it up. If you aren't interested in those things, or you like your post-apocalyptic thrillers with a little bit more sci-fi or a little bit more action, this might not be for you. Please do be aware that this book has some very graphic representations of things, and you should 100% look up trigger warnings before you read this book. With all that being said, that wraps up this video. Have you read any of the books that I mentioned? And if so, did you enjoy them? Please let me know what your favorite book of November was down in the comments below. And today's beverage is in my octopus mug, which is now probably chilly. Yeah, it's almost cold. It's in my octopus mug. Chocolate raspberry tort from the Kroger brand, whatever that is. But again, if you like this video and are not already subscribed, please consider subscribing, and like and comment down below and hit that bell for notifications if you want to see more of my face. If you want to, I post here Thursdays and Sundays, or Sundays and Thursdays. I post on my blog Mondays and Fridays, and I post on I'm on Instagram all month during the month of December to do Decolonize December. I am supporting, it is a photo challenge done by Alejandro at Decolonize Literature, and is focused on uplifting BIPOC creators, and the idea is to sort of, a lot of those in minority communities, and I found myself wanting to support by uplifting BIPOC creators who are doing the challenge. So if you are a BIPOC creator who are doing the hashtag Decolonize December on Instagram, please let me know. I would love to share your share your post on my Bookstagram. You can find me at Mariah's Nerdy Notes, and I'll leave the link down below. And you can find me on Twitter almost every day, pretty much when I'm bored, at Mariah's Notes or Mariah's Nerdy Notes. And my blog is mariahsnerdynotes.wordpress.com. Thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you are having a safe, warm, and healthy holiday season. So with all of that being said, all the best coffee, wine, and books to you. Cheers.